Yeah, full house. Fun stuff. All right, let's go ahead and get started. So I know a couple people were having questions about like, what are we doing? Like, what is this? This is new, right? The main reason for this is historically our no throw has only been 3 days a week. We've done med ball throws and basically just offered them to 3 days a week. Up until last year, we only offered sessions 3 days a week. Right? A lot of the guys that have been around for a while know that. With that in mind, a lot of you guys are used to coming every single day. So I wanted to be able to provide a little extra value, right? Something for you to come in. And then also for me, when it comes to my personal player journey, this type of stuff, the mental performance, the mental development, was really the game changer, right? It basically took me from an average player into a very good collegiate reliever. I by no means all of a sudden became the most talented guy in the world, but it allowed me to get the most of myself on a regular basis. All right, so this stuff is really important to me. Little do you know, whether you know it or not, I've been adding in a lot of this stuff just in the way that we talk about things, right? Just in the way that we kind of go about our system as a whole. So this is just a little bit time for us to talk a little bit more focused on exactly some of these topics so you have a better understanding of how you can apply them to yourself. Does that make sense? Okay. Today, as you can see, we're going to be talking about elite mindset and ownership. All right. At the end of the day, trying to build a foundation of ownership, of process focus, and personal responsibility to help you get your results. All right. So as we're thinking about mindset, as we're thinking about that, we're going to talk a little bit today about how to define mindset. You guys have probably heard that term before, right? Of, hey, have a better mindset, right? You need to have a good mindset in order to be successful, right? But defining that and actually having an understanding of what it means is a completely different story. We'll talk about that a little bit today. We'll talk about the difference between a growth and a fixed mindset. Has anybody heard those two terms before? Right? Carol Dweck, she has a book about the difference between a growth and fixed mindset, and it really plays a big role in how we develop as a person and how we approach obstacles and things like that. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about why mindset is important. What can it help you with, right? How does it actually apply? At the end of the day, with all of this stuff that we talk about, people often, talk about mental performance, talk about those things, but it really doesn't matter unless you see it show up tangibly on the field, right? No different than anything else that we have you do, right? If you don't see a benefit, if you don't get better, right, then why does it matter? So we'll talk a little bit about that. We'll talk about the differences between an average mindset and an elite mindset. We'll talk about what it means to own your process, right? What it means to have belief and control what you do and make sure that you take the steps to be successful, all right? What it looks like to actually practice an elite mindset, and then also we'll talk a little bit about the controllables, right? As I see here, control the controllables, dominate the process, right? You have to have an understanding of exactly what those are and before you can learn to control them, okay? So first off, one of the things, we'll talk a little bit about resources and things that I've learned a lot from that I'll want to share with you guys, but we'll start with a story about Zach Sorensen, okay? He's currently the mental performance coach for the Guardians, right? He played in the big leagues from 98 until about the mid 2000s, right? He played for a while. He's a backup middle infielder, but he now is a mental performance coach. He's still involved with the major leagues, and he shares a great story in this book called The Hard 90. I'll talk a little bit more about that later, of how he was drafted in the second round of the 1998, drafted out of Wichita State. And Gene Stevenson, that was his head coach at the time when he was at Wichita State. After he gets drafted, he gets a call from Gene, his old head coach, says, congratulations on getting drafted. You're about to start the next stage of your athletic career. Congratulations. He starts talking to him and remembers that the scout that got him there in the first place, right? He asked Gene, hey, what did you see in me? Like, what made you take a chance on me and let me play Division I baseball? And Gene reminded him of a story where Steve McFarland, who was a scout at the time, saw him play one game, saw Zach play one game, and recommended him to Gene to play Division I baseball, right? Zach, after he gets drafted, he calls Steve up, says, thank you for giving me the opportunity in the first place to even get a chance, right, to play Division I baseball and then lead into this great career where all of a sudden now I'm getting drafted and I'm now going to be a professional baseball player. Thank you for taking a chance on me. What did you see in that one game that you saw me play, right? He's like, I must have done pretty good if you recommended me to one of the best baseball coaches, best baseball programs in the country at the time, after just one game. And funny enough, Steve says to him, no, you went 0 for 2. You popped up and you grounded out, right? But what you did do is you ran a hard 90, right? I saw when you grounded out, you ran hard the entire way there, and the way that you were playing defensively, all those other things, it showed me that you knew how to play baseball. You were doing things the right way. It led me to believe in you enough that I recommended you to Gene Stevenson, right? So when we talk about the process, when we talk about how we go about everything, that's really the most important thing of anything that we do is how you do it, right? It's not necessarily about the result that you get, but it's about how you go about it to get the best results most often. People who know what they're talking about and know what they're looking for can identify that. They can see that that guy goes about things the right way. And he's going to be successful over the long term, even if he wasn't successful in this one instance that I saw today. Does that make sense? All right. So I like this quote down here. I took this directly from the book. But in a game of results, right, a game of numbers, what matters most is the way the game is played. It's about controlling the things that can be controlled. All right? So let's take that with you, right, and get yourself a little opportunity just by going about things the right way. We'll talk about some key concepts today. Very first thing I want to start with a mindset assessment. So I'm going to have you guys, I'm just going to ask you some questions, and I want you to just think about this for yourself, okay? All I want you to think about is how does this resonate with you? All right? So no need to answer out loud, just answer these questions to yourself. All right? When do you feel most alive? When is a time adversity caused you to break? When was a time that adversity caused you to break through to a higher level? When you're performing at your best, what is that like? What does that feel like? When you're performing at your worst, what is that like? What has made you successful up into this point in your career, in your life? What has held you back from the next level in your career and life? What do you currently do to train your mindset, if anything? Right? Think yoga, think meditation, think any of those things. Do you do anything? What books, podcasts, videos, YouTube things, whatever, what are you doing right now? What are you listening to? What are you taking in? And do you train your mindset just how you train your body or your skills? All right, like I said, those questions are more for you. Okay, I want you to kind of think about those as we go throughout the rest of the day, the rest of the info that we're going to cover today. Okay? But the very next thing, when we think about a mindset, what does an elite mindset look like? What does elite mindset mean? Do you guys have any questions, any ideas of exactly what that would mean? Right? Have you guys seen an elite mindset? It's almost one of those things where like you know it when you see it, but it's hard to define. Right? Do you guys have an idea of what an elite mindset actually looks like? Yeah? Anybody have an example? Kobe Bryant. Mamba mentality, baby. Right? You think about those things. Right? What else? Anybody else? Anybody have an example? I saw a cool quote right after the World Series ended of Mookie Betts talking about how what he was telling himself before he got that ball to win the World Series. Right? He said that he was so nervous. You probably couldn't tell, but he was freaking out. He was like, "Oh my goodness, what am I going to do if the ball gets hit to me?" Right? But he locked himself back in, and all he was telling himself is, "Be nasty, be nasty. If the ball gets to me, I'm going to be nasty." Right? Forcing himself to want to make the play. To me, that's what an elite mindset looks like. Right? Taking the environment, telling yourself something to be able to overcome the pressure that you feel, be able to overcome the negative impact, right? Be able to overcome the things that you're worried about, all right? Even more specifically, the way that I see mindset is it's how you see yourself, your situation, and the world, all right? To put it simply, that's your perspective, okay? How you see things, okay? When you approach adversity, something comes in your way, do you see that as the end? right, of the road? Do you see it as a bend in the road, or do you see it as an opportunity? All right? Those are all different mindsets, all different perspectives about the same obstacle. Does that make sense? When something gets in your way, do you get frustrated or do you become fascinated? Right? Do you approach it with frustration and anger or with curiosity? Do you get fascinated? Do you like, hey, I need to figure this out. I'm excited about this now, opposed to being mad about it? Okay? But at the end of the day, an elite mindset is just the ability to harness an elite perspective very regularly. All right, it allows you to zoom out, see the big picture when necessary, but also attention to detail when it calls for it. Okay. One thing that's important for you to understand is, how you see something isn't the only way that it is, right? So, like one of the examples that I like that I've seen in a book before is, has anybody ever noticed the arrow in the FedEx logo, right? If you haven't ever seen it before, next time you see a FedEx truck, look for the arrow, right? It's right in between the E and the X at the end, right? Where it's, they did that intentionally to kind of talk about, okay, hey, this is the direction that we're going, okay? But if you don't ever look for it, you'll never see it, okay? So it's one of those things where you can adjust your perspective, you can develop your perspective, and therefore develop your mindset, okay? Because at the end of the day, your perspective and how you see things, it shapes your reality, right? Whether or not you feel like you are able to overcome things or if you're going to struggle because of them, okay? With that, moving on to the growth versus fixed mindset, like I talked about. So there's basically two realms of thinking. A fixed mindset is basically a belief that how you are and how you feel about things is an innate quality that you cannot change, right? That's just the way you are, right? You're not going to be able to fix it, not going to be able to change it. This is it. This is how I'm going to be. This is how I'm going to feel about things. This is how I'm going to think, right? Where a growth mindset thinks the other way, right? They think, okay, I'm going to be able to overcome. Or all of a sudden, they look at obstacles, like I was explaining earlier, as something that they can benefit from, okay? A fixed mindset, they feel stuck as they are. They spend too much time documenting intelligence, right? Not enough time developing intelligence. That's one of the things that we talk about all the time. Whenever people constantly come up to us and say, how'd my mechanics look? How'd my mechanics look? How'd my mechanics look? Right? Are you trying to have perfect mechanics, or are you trying to become a better pitcher? Right? Does that make sense? Yeah, mechanics are going to help you get there, but becoming obsessed over getting in intelligence, right? Trying to fix it, trying to intelligently overcome it, opposed to just developing the skill, right? Can cause issues for you, okay? But a growth mindset, they love to learn. They approach life with curiosity, okay? They love the process of developing and exploring. That belief, or what you believe, right, whether or not you approach things with curiosity or with frustration, or the belief that this is just the way it is, or I can overcome it, that's going to change your behavior, right? Whether or not you feel like you can do something about it is going to adjust your effort. Does that make sense, right? If you feel like, hey, I'm never going to get better at this, then why would you try, right? But if you switch that perspective and you're like, hey, this is something I can improve and get better on, then of course you're going to try harder. Okay? And therefore, that behavior will dictate your results, whether or not you do get better at it or not. Okay? Talking about the process, you guys have heard that before. Have a process focus, right? Hey, focus on the process over outcomes. Right? You guys have all heard that before, haven't you? Yeah, for the most part. But tangibly, like, what does that look like? We'll talk about that a little bit more. Well, more so the on purpose, with purpose. We'll talk about that a little bit more. But focusing on the process is focusing on the controllables, okay? At the end of the day, no matter how perfectly placed you throw a baseball, or how hard you throw it, or how nasty the pitch is, the hitter still may hit it, right? So the outcome is not necessarily in your control, okay? But the process is. Did you do everything leading up to that point? Did you make sure that you got ahead, right? You can't control whether or not an umpire calls a strike or not, but if you throw it right down the middle, it's probably going to be one. Does that make sense? Okay? You can control the process and your aspects that you can control, but you can't necessarily control the outcome. Okay? A lot of your success is out of your control, so it's not worth focusing on or worrying about. Okay? There's plenty of things that you can focus on and spend time worrying about that you actually have a tangible chance to doing something with, right? So don't get distracted by the umpire or the weather or, what have you, okay? Or what the other team is doing. It doesn't really matter, right? Especially in baseball, right? There's some sports where you kind of have to adjust to it, right? In football or basketball, you have to actually look at what the defense is doing and adjust your plan to it. But if you guys stick to your game plan, right, in baseball, it doesn't really matter what the other team's doing, okay? And with this, a lot of people who focus too much on the outcome, they start playing the blame game. All right, they're going to blame the umpires when they lose instead of taking personal responsibility for what they could have done better. Right? They're going to blame the other team for cheating, right? Or they just got so lucky. They're going to blame luck opposed to holding accountability and taking responsibility for what they could have done to improve their chances. Does that make sense? They begin to doubt themselves. They play the blame game, right? But at the end of the day, when it comes to having a process focus, your mindset is your responsibility. How you see things is up to you, right? And you're in charge of that, okay? On purpose, with purpose. I want to introduce that idea a little bit today, but we'll talk about it more later, either Thursday or next Tuesday. But it's basically your routines, like having purpose-driven routines, like do things with intention, right? Pretty much the entire thing that we're trying to teach you guys here is, right, your entire week has to have purpose, right? You have to have a plan. It has to work together. If it doesn't, you'll see how you struggle, right? You'll see how it does not work, okay? So anything that you do, you need to do on purpose with purpose, right? If you cannot explain why you're doing a given thing on a given day at a given time, then you probably don't have all the information you should, okay? You need to develop and stick to those routines, right? Do things that matter with purpose. We'll talk about that a little bit more. All right, we'll talk a little bit about core values. At the end of the day, why do you do what you do? Why do you play baseball? Okay? Why do you act the way that you do? Right? If you never think about those core values and what matters to you most, then you're missing out on a lot of things that are going to drive you and push you further, right? Especially when things get hard, right? But if you don't think about those regularly, it's going to be tough, okay? And then MVP, mission, vision, and principles. It's basically who you are becoming, okay? Your mission is why you do what you do. Your vision is where you want to go. And your principles are how you want to do it, okay? What matters to you, right? Do you want to be the guy that the team can count on? Do you want to be the guy that the coach trusts, right? Those are going to come down to your principles. How do you behave, right? How do you carry yourself? Okay, so think about all these things as we go out throughout the next week. Okay, one thing that I want to talk about here is, so this is something that I actually stole from Iowa Western, right? What I really like about it, and when I was at Pitt, I put it up in our locker room. It was right in between two big mirrors in the bathroom, okay? And at the end of the day, when it comes down to it, the person that you see in the mirror, imagine two big mirrors here, right? And you're staring in one of them. But you are responsible for your choices, your efforts, your attitudes, your grades, your successes, your words, and your actions. Okay, that's a lot of responsibility, right? It's a lot of control that you do have over how your life goes and how successful you are in life and in sport. That's a lot of control that you do have. So spend time focusing on these things, right? Not on the things that you can't. That make sense? I'm going to move on a little bit to a discussion. So the way that these are going to kind of go, you'll get into a rhythm of it all, but I'll talk like I just did for the last 10 minutes about some concepts. But then I want to kind of talk about them, right? I want to get your take on some of these ideas. So in your mind, anybody can blurt this out, just start talking. What separates an average player from an elite performer? Off the field work. What does that look like? Routine regimen. Yeah. Yeah, working hard all the time, finding opportunities. Yeah. What else?
So like how you respond after you mess up something bad.
Okay, give me an example.
Strike out, like what are you doing on the way back to the dugout? Are you feeding, like, you're on deck better, or just throwing it back?
Very good. Yeah, very good. It's a good idea. Anybody else have any ideas? Those are two good ones. I think we could probably talk for half an hour just about what separates an average player from an elite one, right? I know that for a fact I really like hearing stories of, like that Mookie Betts story I shared earlier, about, that's what's going to allow him to be an elite performer. Or like all the stuff that's going around social media now of Yoshi, right? All the stuff that he does, the mobility work that he does in order to maintain all that stuff, and also all the weird things that everyone was like, man, this guy's so strange. He throws little rockets out of his arm, right? But now he's a World Series MVP. He's an absolute dog, right? But he did something to separate himself, right? Those things are, I always find that interesting, right? What are the best of the best at what we want to accomplish? What are they doing on a regular basis? Okay. What about what can you control daily that influences your performance? What about that second question up here? What can you think about? Effort and attitude. I love that. Nutrition, very good. Sleep, yes. What else? Yeah, how you allocate your time, right? Are you focusing on the right things? Are you spending the time, doing what you need to be doing? And how about this one? How does focusing on the process free you from the fear of failure? One thing that I think about when this question makes me remember is you can almost tell during a post game interview, especially when games go bad, how good the mental performance training is for individual athletes. Like, how do they respond to a loss, right? Like, if they have mistakes and they made mistakes, they'll own up to them, say, hey, our defense wasn't where it should be, right? Hey, we didn't pitch it the way that we needed to. Our offense had opportunities and we didn't take advantage of them. Or they'll give credit to the other team, said, hey, we played a great game of baseball and they just were better than us today, right? That's not a knock to them. That's just props to the other team. They understood that, hey, we did everything we were trying to, right? They took accountability for the mistakes that they made, but hey, at the end of the day, we did what we were trying to accomplish and the results were out of our hands. They did better than us today, right? They're going to have to do that, right? The way that I think about this, right, and the thing that I try to get across to you guys a lot of the time is if you have those routines and that effort consistently, right, over the course of your week, over the course of your off season, over the course of your career, you're going to be really, really really well off, right, when it comes to game time. You know, in the back of your head, I've done everything I possibly could do, right, to put myself in a good situation, right? Does that make sense? I've done everything I possibly could do. So at the end of the day, when I put my feet on the rubber or I step in the box, it's out of my hands. Right? I've done everything, right? All that's left to do is to do the damn thing, right? There's no more fixing it. There's no more trying to do a little bit more. It's all out of my hands now. I've done it all, right? So you focusing on the process is going to help free you, right? Have a checklist, right? Of all the things that you want to do in order to feel good, feel prepared going into this outing, going into this game, going into this test, right? And hey, now there's nothing left to it but to do it. Right? That's what I think about when I think about that. Okay? So, like I said at the beginning, none of this matters unless we figure out how to apply these concepts to ourselves. Okay? So, what we're going to do now is a couple application practices. Okay? Very first thing, so either take out your phones or just think about this. And I want you to think about within your athletic development, within your process, list 5 things that you can control. I'll give you guys a minute or two. And while you're at it, go ahead and list 5 more things that you can't. 5 more things you can't control. All right, somebody spit some ideas out. All right, what are some things that you can control, that you do have control over? What'd somebody write down? Sleep, right? When you go to bed? Time management. What specifically are you thinking about when you think time management? Yeah, like actually making use of your day, right? That's good. What else?
Nutrition, what you put in your body.
Nutrition, very good. Yeah. What else? Commitment. How so? What does that mean to you? Okay, very good. Yeah. I like the old saying of why half-ass two things when you can whole-ass one thing, right? Buy in, commit. All right. What else? Attitude. That's a good one. You can control your attitude. Anybody else have any good ones? Your grades. Very good. Yeah. And your grades are going to get you opportunities or rob you of them, right? Especially for you high school kids, okay? Uncommitted high school kids. They're going to give you opportunities or they're going to take them away. That's in your control as well, right? And I like the idea of how you do anything is how you do everything, right? So if you're going to be committed to your grades and being good in school, you're more likely to, to also do the same outside, okay? What about what things you can't control? List 5 things. Anybody have any good ideas of what you can't control, what you don't have control over? Outcome? Very good. Nice. Yeah. The weather. Very good. I love the some days you win, some days you lose, some days it rains, right? Other people. Very good. You can't control how bought in they are, right? You can't control how disciplined they are, right? But you can set an example, right? What else? Umpires. That's a big one. No matter how bad the zone is, you getting mad about it's not going to help anything. It's just going to hurt you. All right? What else? No? Those are good ones. Those are good. But that's a good one. Yeah, whether or not you get an opportunity, right? You can show it, right? You can show everything, right? Make it undoubtable, but at the end of the day, you still got to write your name in. What else? Anybody else got anything about you can control or can't control before we move on? No? All right. Let's go to the next thing. So now I want to do an exercise kind of talking about your core values. I think it's really important to revisit why you do things, right? It's going to help with motivation. It's going to help with commitment, like we were talking about earlier, right? It's going to help with who you want to be and how you want to do it, right? But let's go through a practice here. This one we're not going to share, but I want you to do it on your phone or just sit here and think about it, okay? And I want you to imagine a baseball eulogy, all right? We're at the funeral for your baseball career, all right? Your cleats and your glove and your bat are sitting up there on the mantle, and all your fans, all your friends, all your teammates are all sitting there, right? And one by one, they go up and they speak about you as a player, right? What are 3 things that you want to have been known for? You get to sit in the back and you get to watch this funeral take place. You get to listen to them all talk about their eulogy, but as a player, how do you want to be remembered? Okay? Or what do you want to be known for? Right? Let's start there. All right, what do you want to be known for? When they describe you as a player, what do you want them to say? List 3 things. And putting this another way, or slightly changing a little bit, what 3 things do you want to be remembered for? All right, the way that I think about this is more of a descriptor. What do you want to be known for? They knew you as this player. But now when they remember you, right, that might change some things, right? Might be less about how you were on the field, but maybe a little bit more about how you were off, right? Less about the player that you were and more about the teammate you were, all right? List 3 more things about that. And like I said, I'm not going to have anybody share any of these, but I think it's important to go through this practice of really believing, right, and reminding yourself of exactly who you want to be, what matters most to you, what values, right, are most important to you, okay? Because at the end of the day, baseball is a temporary thing, right? It's not going to be forever, right? Even Clayton Kershaw has to retire eventually, right? He just pitched his last game, okay? He's been a baseball player for my entire life. Like, as long as I could think about watching MLB baseball, he's been there. Right now, he's done, right? It ends for everybody, okay? But keeping these things in the forefront of your mind is vital, all right? Because at the end of the day, you want to make sure that the routines that you develop, the processes that you go about developing, they line up with those core values, right? And when things get difficult and you try to remember, why do I do this, right? Go back to this. Go back to these things, okay? There's a few more things for you, okay? Application, how does this look in practice? Everything that we've talked about today, this is great, but when you're in the middle of a game or you're in your next bullpen, what is this going to look like, right? The biggest thing here is returning to the controllables, right? So as we talked about, if the umpires are pissing you off, right? Or the other teams just, they get a lucky break and they score a bunch of runs. Are you going to worry about, oh my goodness, we had the game in the bag and now they're winning, right? Or are you going to focus on the here and now? You're going to focus on what do we do now, right? What can we control? We can't control the fact that your buddy made an error, but we can pick him up, right? We can't control that the umpire gave away that, that 3-2 count, that full count, right? You thought it was a strike, he thought it was a ball, and he's on first base, right? But you can attack the next hitter, okay? Can't control the fact that you swung through the best pitch you think you're going to see all day, but you can make for damn sure you're not going to miss the next one, right? So returning to the controllables when things get tough, right? When we see our mind drifting into some of those things that we listed that we cannot control, remind yourself of what is the connected thing that I do have control over, right? So returning to those when things get difficult, okay? The next thing is ownership, like taking ownership over the things that you have control over, right? Over your own process, over your own routines, okay? Taking responsibility and having accountability for those same things, all right? Ownership, responsibility, and accountability is kind of, all similar ideas, right? But understanding that your career, right, is your responsibility. You take ownership over it. Hold yourself accountable. Hold your friends accountable. Hold your peers accountable, right? Lift everybody up with you, okay? So key takeaways, we talked about elite mindset, okay? Hopefully you have a better understanding of exactly what that looks like and what that should feel like, right? And something to strive towards, right? Start developing the routines that you need in order to get there as consistently as possible. And hopefully you're able to notice when you start to drift out of it, okay? At the end of the day, you need to own your process and your preparation, right? It makes it a lot easier to not worry about the outcome when you know you've done everything that you were supposed to before it's time for you to toe the rubber or it's time for you to step in the box. Okay? Build your habits around the controllables and build your habits around those core values. Okay? Excuse me. Sorry about that. Let's go to the next one. Couple different resources for you guys. Okay? So these are all books that have been extremely influential to me, okay? Books and podcasts. So Zach Sorensen, that was the story that I shared earlier. We're going to talk especially a lot of stuff from these two and from Harvey Dorfman, but these all helped me out a ton. I read this when I was in high school, right? A lot of you guys don't know this, but I got to the point where I played varsity as a sophomore, right? And then my junior year, I was the only returning pitcher. And then I pitched maybe, I bet 10 more innings combined my junior, senior year, right? Because I could not throw a strike. It got way too big for me. So before I went to college, luckily enough, I still got an opportunity. I was able to read through a lot of these things and go from there, right? But this helped a ton, okay? So when I'm talking about feeding yourself consistently, it's not going to be enough over these next 6 weeks if you just listen to me talk 11 times, right? But if you constantly have a book, right, or a podcast, right? The Hard 90 by Zach Sorensen, it's a book. It's also a podcast that he puts out regularly, right? Brian Cain has 2 different podcasts. He has Mental Performance Mastery, which is long-form interviews, right? And he has short-form Mental Performance Dailies, okay? They're like 10 minutes long. You can listen to them on your drive from school here, okay? And then these 2 books by Harvey Dorfman, both on the pitching side and the hitting side, are extremely beneficial, right? And one thing that I didn't put up here, because all of these guys are influenced by him, is Ken Ravizza, right? He's basically the godfather of mental performance, okay? He taught Brian Cain and Zach Sorensen how to be a mental performance coach, right? So he has a book called Heads Up Baseball. Okay, I have it over there. I forgot the name of it, so I looked over. But that's like the forefront where a mental performance, especially as it pertains to baseball, kind of started. So if you're looking for more resources of things, if you find this interesting, start looking at some of those. Okay, and then finally, I'm going to leave you with just a little bit of homework. This is something you don't have to say out loud, but just think about something. What is something you want to control better this week? Okay, you want to be more in control of, right? Could it be a process, maybe a habit, maybe just the way that your mind wanders or a mindset issue? All right, and then also, what is something you want to stop wasting your energy on? Something that is not serving you. Okay, I want you to think about that and take that with you as you go. Okay, that is all I got today. Okay, thank you guys for listening. All right, we'll do this again next Thursday. We'll be doing this every Tuesday and Thursday at 4 p.m. for the next 6 weeks, except for Thanksgiving. Okay, all right. So we'll have plenty of topics to talk about, plenty of time going through this. So thank you guys. All right, go knock out the rest of your day. All right.